Consistency is absolutely crucial when building a business, and I'm going to talk about consistency with small audiences, and of course if you have large audiences it works even better. But I'm going to talk about a small audience, and I'm going to talk about how to use that consistency and the reason why it is so effective. And I'm going to talk about this podcast here that you're listening to.
Your ability to persuade others is one of the most powerful resources you will ever discover. During this eye-opening podcast, you'll join Wayne Sutton as you uncover the secrets of influence based upon science and proven in the real world.
Today's podcast brought to you by sellingyourcoaching.com. Sellingyourcoaching.com. If you're a coach, consultant, course creator, and you are in the beginning stages, or you're already doing multiple six figures and you're looking to scale, then jump on board, sellingyourcoaching.com. Now, let's get into the podcast. So, I worked with a good friend of mine a number of years ago who had a couple of different podcast shows that he did. One was local. The beautiful part of living here on the coast was it was really about saltwater fishing. Again, so we're looking at a geographically targeted area, and we're looking at a podcast that you either really cared a lot about or you had no interest in. But the beautiful part, what he taught me was, Wayne, you don't have to have thousands of downloads. It's better to have a targeted audience. It's not that you have 10,000 people listening. It's that you have dedicated followers that listen because you bring value and they're curious about the subject. So he was able to bring in six-figure sponsorship deals with a very small audience. Now, in the beginning of this, you heard me say this podcast is sponsored by sellingyourcoaching.com, so go check it out. Now, I will give you examples of how I have created clients through this podcast, which we do not get millions of downloads. Now, I've been consistent in seasons. I'm going to go ahead and tell you what you need to do. You need to be consistent every day or every week. When are you putting your podcast out? I've made the decision to put this podcast out Monday through Friday, with exceptions. If I'm on vacation, I'm not feeling well, I'll skip a day. However, Monday through Friday, without exception, of those exceptions, I'm going to get out a podcast, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and I'm going to begin to bring in some people that we're going to interview. Now, why is that important? Why is it important when I go into Podbean and I go into my analytics and I look at how many people downloaded? It's not that, hey, I had 200 people download today, or I had 100 people download today. I've had days where there's 20, I've had days where there's 60. The beautiful part is, I want to be consistent because I'm not looking to one person that says, hey, that's a great podcast. I'm looking to the person that says, interesting. And they scroll back and they listen to podcast after podcast after podcast episode. I had someone just recently say, Wayne, I love that podcast. And when you talked about this, and I'm like, oh my gosh, that was several years ago. So they either found it through social media, which is fine, or they were scrolling through the playlist. I had someone else tell me, Wayne, I listened to your podcast on how to build rapport unconsciously. And I've done a couple of those. I'm not sure which one they listened to. And I just kind of, I went back and listened to probably 20 of your podcasts. And I definitely want to see how we can work together. And I was able to enroll them and help them in their coaching business. So they went back, and what happens, the beautiful thing with a podcast is they kind of indoctrinate themselves, if your content's good. Now, another way of doing this is, hey, you do 5 a week, or 1 a week, whatever, but let's just take 5 a week. You do 5 a week, and you do this for 90 days. So basically 20 a month for 90 days. You're taking off weekends. You've got about 60 episodes. You could set that up as a autoresponder. You could set that up into when somebody subscribes to your free lead magnet, somebody subscribes to the show, whatever, then they automatically receive these in email. And now you've got 60 days that you could send them information. And the beautiful part is today, September 5th, I'm recording this one. I could drop this one into the same email sequence. So every day, not only am I bringing new content that can be discovered, but I'm truly building content that other people can find. Now, Can you do this with Instagram Reels? Absolutely. Can you do it with your TikTok content? Absolutely. So there's so much you can do it with. It doesn't have to be a podcast. But the reason I love a podcast is, number one, very easy to do. Number two, and again, you can do video, audio. I'm choosing to do audio podcast at this moment. Very easy to do. I can do it at my convenience. I can look at which podcast episodes got the most views or most downloads, and I can place them inside of my autoresponder sequence. I can also look at which ones didn't, and I can either A, go back and listen to it and discover why, or B, I can take them out of a sequence, etc. Also, I can look back and say, wow, this one got a lot of response, a lot of downloads. Now I can go back and create more content in that area. Are you with me? So again, having a content creation system that you can literally do. I'm 6 minutes into recording this podcast. I'll probably end in the next 2 to 3 minutes. I will click a button and it will upload. It'll upload into Podbean, Apple Podcast, all that fun stuff. But then I'll also take that content and then I can send it out to my email list. I can put it on my website. What we're looking for, though, remember this. Yes, am I saying don't build a large audience? Of course not. But I'd rather have an audience that is targeted. I'd rather have a targeted audience. If it's a podcast about saltwater fishing and we're on the coast of Wilmington, North Carolina, then it's going to draw more people, or at least should draw more people, but also should draw people that are more interested in it than someone in Boise, Idaho. Make sense? So who are you talking to? Now, I'm doing this podcast recently. We're talking a lot about how to sell your coaching. But also, the podcast is on neuropersuasion, which is our sales system. But they go hand in hand. Now, could I start a separate podcast? Yeah, sure. But the point is, and I do have a ministry podcast. I'm a minister and I have a ministry podcast. So I'm talking to people that are looking for truth and revelation and insight in the Christian faith. So if you want to check that out, it's straighttalkwithwayne.com. But anyway, what I'm telling you to do today is to determine, are you creating content, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, podcast, that you can be consistent in. So when somebody finds one piece of content about you, they can go back, scroll back, and listen to many, many, many episodes and indoctrinate themselves why they must work with you. Number two, it's a great way to look at the downloads and see who's looking at what. Who's interested in what. What should you do more content on? And what should you put into your autoresponder sequences? So, all right, guys, hope this has been helpful for you. If you are looking to create a podcast, if you're looking to be featured on podcast, or you want to know more about this information, again, go to sellingyourcoaching.com, put in your name, email address, receive my information, and let's have a conversation. So go out there today. Change lives. That's what you're doing as a coach. Change lives and get wealthy doing it. God bless.
Go to yourpersuasioncoach.com for more powerful resources on how to influence yourself, influence others, and impact the world.